Start doing prayer requests. That's a private matter, not for the world to know. Oh, for Jeff has a big day tomorrow. All day, 10 hours. It's a big day for him. So we'll talk about that later. How many are here? How many youth are here? 3. Yeah, Jeff's father collapsed this morning, and they're in a hospital right now, and he didn't know if he was going to make it or not, and he sent me a text just a little bit ago saying that they're still waiting on CAT scan results. He won't. Oh, the youth? There's only a few today. Oh, okay. Right. And the air conditioner. All right. See here. Morning, boys. Good evening. When does school start again? I keep asking. 24th. And all 3 of y'all going to class? Unfortunately. Hey, when it comes to cases in Oklahoma, it's doing better. We haven't had 1,000 in over a week. It's been 400, 600. Huh? It's, hasn't been 1,000 in a while. Sunday was like 400 something. It was pretty low. Today was 600 something. But no, everyone's doing better. Does anyone really here care about college football? I know Dennis does, right? I know he would. Making the news, Oh, really? I didn't know that. Man, they so their protocol is they're going to test you 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and if you test positive, oh man, they're going to do EKG on you. They're going to do like a bunch of heart stuff on you, because apparently there's a symptom or COVID has potential and impact on big people's hearts. Big people's hearts, not little people's hearts. Big. But they also said things like, also that causes this myocardiac is influenza, and the cold can cause these things too. And so it's like, oh, now we're hearing about it, right? Now we're hearing about it. So despite cold can cause it, but anyway, I just feel sorry for Nebraska, Ohio State. All right. Oh, oh, they're gonna have to forfeit $50 million. That'd be tough. Hopefully. I don't even know what conference they're in. Are they in the MAC? Well, Sunbelt's wanting to play. Job 28, people. So y'all know. Job 28. Job 28. A hymn to wisdom. Would you guys like some pew Bibles? I give. Mm-hmm. Job 28, right before Psalms. In so many ways, Job 28 is not hard to follow. This is probably one of the easiest chapters in the book of Job. I mean, you can clearly see what Job is trying to say. Although when Job comes to his conclusion, it's kind of like, you just almost didn't take your own advice. As he ends with it. So Job chapter 28, verses 1 through 11, and then 12 through 19, and then finally 20 through 28. So let's look at verses 1 through 11. Job 28, starting in verse 1. There is a mine for silver and a place where gold is refined. Iron is taken from the ground and copper is smelted from ore. A miner puts an end to the darkness. He probes the deepest recesses for ore in the gloomy darkness. He cuts a shaft far from human habitation in places unknown to those who walk above ground. Suspended far away from people, the miners swing back and forth. Food may come from the earth, but below the surface, the earth is transformed as by fire. Its rocks are a source of lapis and lazuli, containing flecks of gold. No bird of prey knows that path. No falcon's eye has seen it. Proud beasts have never walked on it. No lion has ever prowled over it. The miner uses a flint tool and turns up ore from the root of the mountains. He cuts out channels in the rocks, and his eyes spot every treasure. He dams up the streams from flowing so that he may bring to light what is hidden. So, it's about humans. Verses 1 through 11 is about man and their accomplishments. So what is he highlighting about their accomplishments as just humanity? What's he amazed at about humans? Right, I mean, as he compares to the falcons, mining. I mean, to be able to dig deep into the earth, to make shafts, to bring to light what's been in the darkness. I mean, I'm not a miner. I have no idea what it entails. Nowadays, we have some massive industrial tools to do it. But even in Job's day, Job is deeply impressed with what the humanity can accomplish, such as digging deep. That even such thing as, I think he quotes the lion or uses the lion. You have in verse 8, he said, proud beasts have never walked on it. No lion has ever prowled over it. The biblical view of a lion is like it's the most majestic, most powerful creature that's really displayed, aside from Leviathan, that we're going to come across later. But the lion is used constantly as a strong and a savage beast that even the lion itself can't get into the mines. They don't know how. Even the falcon with its high in the sky can't see below the earth at all. But humanity, with their ability that God has given them, can do it. Now, just kind of are you not amazed already about this practical here? Humanity. Is it not amazing? We as humans can run faster. We can go faster than any land animal. We can go higher than any other created creature. What? Well, and these miners can't dig with their bare hands, but they use tools. We have tools that make us go faster. We have tools that can tame a great white shark. We have tools. I mean, we understand how a lion works. Or I mean, we would just have it for show, a chair and a whip to keep a lion tame and away from us. I mean, our understanding of God's created order is much better than it was, obviously, before Abraham's time. Yes, I mean, tree huggers. I haven't heard that a tree hugger in a while. I'm afraid to blast tree huggers. It'd just be some mean comments that come later on. No, I'm sure most of my viewers with bashing tree huggers. But so in the beginning, we're highlighting humanity, and he's got a point that we're getting at here. Okay, man, when they come together, obviously, when you read Genesis and the story of Babylon, when they built this great tower, God says if these humans come together, all like-minded, there's nothing that can stop them. And so he confuses the language. So humanity, that when God made humanity in his image, they can accomplish great things. You look today, medicine is amazing, isn't it? In some ways it's amazing, in some ways it's still primitive. Our cure for cancer is still kill your body or cut it off. But yet with heart disease, we can go in, we can cut out here and put you to sleep. You won't feel a thing. We can open you up and just move things and give you an extra 20, 30 years, if not 40. I mean, it's amazing what medicine can do. These are just feats that humanity has done. It's amazing. However, despite the great feats that we have accomplished, we're still not wise. And that's where we're going to get at here. So, moving on, starting in verse 12. But where can wisdom be found? And where is understanding located? No one can know its value, since it cannot be found in the land of the living. The ocean depths say, it's not in me, while the sea declares, I don't have it. And gold cannot be exchanged for it, and silver cannot be weighed out for its price. Wisdom cannot be valued in the gold of Ophir, in precious onyx or lapis lazuli. Gold and glass do not compare with it, and articles of fine gold cannot be exchanged for it. Coral and quartz are not worth mentioning. The price of wisdom is beyond pearls. Topaz from Cush cannot compare with it, and it cannot be valued in pure gold. Where then does wisdom come from? And where is understanding located? So, now going from verses 12 to 19, now what is he focusing on? Wisdom compared to, for all the precious rocks and metals that they've been mining for, right? I'm not going to try to repeat all these things. The onyx, the gold, the silver, all the coral, all these things that are valued thousands of years ago are still valued today. No, I have not bought gold. I keep seeing those commercials, and I'm still not going to buy gold. It's amazing how that became a thing. Buy gold, buy gold, buy gold. But even still, this is kind of the point that we're making. Precious metals are still precious metals. But now we're comparing that all the work that these miners are doing, all this great achievements that they have done in their building shafts so that they can breathe and keep going deep and deep into the core. When there's fire underground, that's probably referred to lava, that they have witnessed in the transformation of the ground. All these things, and they bring out what they discover, and yet still, in all that digging and all that effort, wisdom cannot be valued in pure gold. Going there in verse 19. And he says that over and over. In verse 15, it says, gold cannot be exchanged for it. In verse 13, no one can know its value. So now we're getting on to all the work that men do, all the achievements, grand things, the discovery, still doesn't have the wisdom, oversees all, surpasses all. Now let's keep going about wisdom. Verse 20, or verse 21. It is hidden from the eyes of every living thing and concealed from the birds of the sky. Abaddon and Death say, we have heard news of it with our ears. But God understands the way to wisdom, and He knows its location. For He looks to the ends of the earth and sees everything under the heavens. When God fixed the weight of the wind and distributed the water by measure, when He established a limit for the rain and a path for the lightning, He considered wisdom and evaluated it. He established it and examined it. He said to mankind, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to turn from evil is understanding. So, think about that just for a moment. On your own, can you discover wisdom apart from God? No. So that's the question, first of all. What is wisdom? Let's talk about that. Just what is wisdom? Why is the fear of the Lord wisdom? Well, let's talk about that just because it's more important than anything you own. That's the point that Job is making. Your whole life's work, boys, you guys are going to go off to college, you're going to work, you're going to build up your assets, you're going to have all these things. Pretty soon, you're going to have 30 years of work in your home. You're going to have 30 years of work to look back on and say, this is what I spent my life doing. For some of y'all, it's collecting something, or perhaps working towards something, or building something. I mean, all the things that you're going to spend your time on, that's what your value. But I mean, here in Scripture here, what is value? It's not the great building. It's not the amazing work. It's not the legacy you're leaving. I don't believe in legacy. I really don't. In 1,000 years, you're going to be forgotten just as me. Now, with Facebook, who knows what 1,000 years is going to look like. We're going to have our pictures in some grand encyclopedia. Who knows? But then someone's going to forget your password and it's gone. I mean, who knows? Who knows? Maybe 100 years from now, maybe a great-grandchild might know my name. 1,000 years from now, it's going to take a scholar who's having to do some deep digging to know my name. And that's it. Hold on. Now, that doesn't mean that the work I'm putting into my children aren't eternal. I mean, think about the things that you invest in. And I'm going to mention this a little bit this Sunday. I'll mention a little bit this Sunday. If a new believer were to live with you last week, the past 7 days, where would they find your value? What would you talk about? What would you spend time on? What would you spend your money on? Where would you complain? Oh, there you go. Well, they're just a ghost watching you. How about that? Let me put it that way. They're just going to watch you. And they're going to see all the things that you do and the things that I do. And they probably last 24 hours, they probably think this kid needs to let go of college football. Probably what they would need if they were to live with me in the past 24 hours. What would they say? Again, this gets to just the heart of the matter, is value. What do you value? He makes all this list about human achievement, and then he talks about the value of wisdom, and that you can't get it apart from God. But that you can get it. Think about that. He doesn't say humanity is unable to obtain wisdom. They can through the fear of the Lord. I mean, is that like a hard discovery? Think for a moment. Is fearing the Lord just a hard discovery? Is that some sort of deep code in the Bible? I can't stand those books. I can't stand those people. Secret code to the Bible. There's no secret code to the Bible. Jim's asking if anyone can teach the youth. Got you covered. Now, obviously, let's put this in term here. Let's put this in the term. Let's start asking this question. What does it mean to fear the Lord? What is that aspect of fear? We've talked about it before. But maybe you've been meditating on that thought, or you've had some thoughts of your own. We live in a society today where the idea of spending time thinking is almost frowned upon and as a waste of time. And that's not good. That's not true. You need to spend time thinking. So hopefully you've had some time to think in our time together. To fear the Lord. What does it mean to fear? I've heard reverence. That's another common term. I've heard respect. Yeah, it's hard to talk about Job without knowing the ending, isn't it? What do you think about fear? What does it mean? Fear the Lord. What is your... It's unimaginable in so many ways. I have never been in the presence of someone with power. You know, I've never been in the I've had a boss, and the most he can do is fire me. And that's it. I've never had to stand before a judge who's going to determine my fate. I've never had to go there before, so I wouldn't know. I've never had the idea of throw yourself at the mercy of the court. I've never had to experience that. I did get pulled over a couple weeks ago, which I fixed that brake light. It was a brake light issue. He was kind enough to inform me that I had a top brake light. But I mean, he could have written me up or something like that, paid money. But I've never had someone stand over me and decide my future. Here's a question. If Jesus were to appear before you today, what would be your reaction? What would you think you'd see? What would you see? Everyone's got a picture. You've been reading, going to church. You got an idea. I mean, when I went to that play, Heaven's Gates, Hell's Flames, when they met Jesus, it was like, "What's up, bro?" Goodness. Gave him a big hug. In his glorified form, yes. When John sees him in the beginning of Revelation, John sees him. And we've talked about this before. I mean, John knows Jesus, right? He can spot him in a crowd. Yeah. But when he saw Jesus in that moment in his glorified form, what did John do? Fell on his face like he was dead. Now imagine that. Now why would he do that? Well, what did he see that I've never been that I saw something so amazing that it would just shock me to the floor. It's like Isaiah 6 kind of. Right, there'll be no sun. And it's almost reminiscent of Moses a little bit. I mean, when Moses was with God, he came back, he was white. It's like a flavor, just like again, one of those things that when Jesus touches you, you become clean. It's God touched Moses, and that we get a little bit of what the result was. And Moses, people couldn't look at his face because it was white. And that's just someone that was in contact, not the source. He knows all things, knows all thoughts, knows all decisions. There's no such thing as a skeleton in a closet. There's no secret shame or hiding. It all comes to the light. And something that I just want us to remind ourselves every time we gather, every time the scriptures are read together. I mean, that is God speaking when we read His Word together. He speaks. And oftentimes we can easily treat this like just a textbook, a law book. Well, what should we do? Well, in Isaiah 2, this means, we treat this as a lawyer or as a textbook often. And it's not true. I mean, this is God in His words that represent Him and what He wants. Now, we'll talk more about that Sunday. I'm going to go over Deuteronomy chapter 6 Sunday. I love the greatest commandment. In some ways, it has to, unfortunately, we've trying to make it as competing between the Great Commission and the Great Commandment. They're different. And I do believe one takes precedent. But beyond that, now we talk about fearing the Lord. Fearing the Lord, let's talk about wisdom. All right, so you have in Job 28 there, in the last one, he says, the fear of the Lord that is wisdom. Now, is that the only time you've come across that? Of course not. Proverbs 1, verse 7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Now, Proverbs makes it as though it's the beginning. And I don't mean the starting point of a race, more like the foundation of a building. So the foundation when you build is, that's the fear of the Lord, and then you put on top. Whereas some people treat the fear of the Lord as the beginning of knowledge, like it's a starting point, like in a race. But in the race, you care more about the ending than you do the beginning. So I like the idea of a foundation. That's how you begin to grow in wisdom. So let's talk about wisdom. What do you think the Bible means when it says wisdom? Is it possible then to... Is Michelle in there? I see the baby. Oh. I was just like, I see the kid. Oh, okay. Okay. Wisdom. So, but going back, if I memorize the Bible, if I read all these commentaries, if I give you the meanings that are plain and simple here, is that still wisdom? So it's more than just knowledge. Teach me, that I may know your ways and obey. Even though he knew his ways, he still said, teach me. What if I were to say wisdom as in walking with God? As you in your journey in life, God wants you to walk with Him and to Him. So you have the skill in knowing what He wants in all ways. So whenever turbulence comes your way, you have the skill, the wisdom to walk in accordance to what God wants you to walk. It's about God and His ways, His path, rather than you just kind of meandering your own way. Right, you predestination. Oh, I know. It was an attempt at a theological joke, and it went up like a lead balloon. So, uneducated people. But like, what are we talking about, though? Just because you know things, you know terms, doesn't make you wise. Does not make you wise. And, this is the thing. If this wisdom, which is accessible to all of God's people, you don't have to pay money for it. You don't have to, sacrifice your children for it. You don't have to do anything for it. If you just but seek it in your heart and your mind, God gives it. Proverbs chapter 2. It's a heart issue. Now let's talk about the fruit for a second of those that fear the Lord. And that's the next part of 28. And to turn from evil is understanding. That's the part that you can tell when someone fears the Lord. Is the fruit of it is that they turn away from wickedness. That means they understand. They understand who God is, and the result is they're gonna walk in obedience. So wisdom is a lot. I just bit myself. Wisdom is more than just words. It is obedience to God, delighting and enjoying Him. Because as I think about it for a second, just preachers that I've known, man. I know one preacher. He preached for years. He was having an affair. There's another preacher in Norman, I mentioned this before, who got arrested 20 years in the pulpit, arrested for child abuse, sexual abuse, and child pornography. He lived his life taking from those that can't defend themselves. And they're at the pulpit, reading commentaries, giving you good quips. We're all wicked people. But that's the point that I'm trying to get at, is that it's more than just how well someone speaks. It's more than if you can memorize an evangelism program, or when you talk to people about Christ, it's more about your life, what you do on a day-to-day basis. And that's why I always said, if there's a ghost in your house, that's secular. If there's a ghost in your house and they watch your life, they're going to see what you value. And is fearing God your value? Is Jesus your value? And just going back to Proverbs chapter 2, this idea of seeking the Lord. And what just the things you're going to have to ask. It's so easy to entertain ourselves these days. Boy, it doesn't take much. It's so easy to spend money on things we don't need. But that's not to say fun is evil. It can be. I'm trying to get to the hard issue. Do you really believe is Jesus the true gold, diamond value in your life? Jesus is more important than your spouse. Remember what Joey Tombrella used to say when he's dead and he's up in heaven. You know what? I'm going to see my wife, and her name was Michelle. And he's like, no, I'm going to see you. I'm going to be like, hey, Michelle, but we're both giving praise to Jesus. It's not going to be about us living together again. That's over. That's over. Procreation was a big part of why marriage exists. There's no need for that anymore. No need for that. Jesus is going to be the all-consuming desires of your heart. And there's some reason why it can't be today. If people were to come here, and that's the thing about McGuire Baptist Church for just a moment, what would they say is the greatest value at McGuire Baptist Church? And you can tell that by what they say why you should come to church. Oftentimes I hear, they can give this to you. Preacher's funny. Not me. Heard others. Preacher, he's a funny guy. What does that got to do with church? What does that got to do? When you talk about McGuire Baptist Church, what do you say? And it ought to be Christ-centered. That you hear Jesus when you come. That the God that you love, the God that you value more than your own life, the God that you value more than your own spouse, more than your own children, all these things exists here. And you hear? That is a Christ-centered church. But then they look about things that we don't get angry at. Things get divisive over. Is it all in trying to serve Jesus, or is it about preference? What are these? What do they say? Now I'm going on a preaching rant here. Because really the next question we need to ask is, why does Job 28, which seems like a beautiful hymn, fit in the context of where Job's at? That's the big question. But we'll get there in just a second. The fear of the Lord, as we just read, is the greatest value that anything can have, and yet oftentimes we value it very little. And we're all worried about hurting people's feelings, or we're all worried about such small things. I want us to believe Jesus is real, that he is the king, and that's who we come to serve. That's why when we show that video about John MacArthur, I'm all in favor of it. Something happens when God's people gather, when we hear his word come to us. It's hard to explain. It's hard to explain to the world. Why we gather to hear God's word. That's how God's always done it. Mount Sinai. Pentecost. There's something about the gathering and the hearing of God's word that changes life. But I'm going around. But let's go back to that first question I asked. You read Job 28 together. We see, Job seems to be spot on here, right? This seems like to be the chapter that Job is right on. How does this fit, do you think, into the context as the book as a whole? That's a big question. So think for a moment. Chapters 1 through 27. What's happened? Job is hurting. He's suffering. Satan had a deal with God, and God proved Satan that, nope, Satan, you're wrong from the beginning. And yet through all that, Job suffered greatly. And then the guys came out. It's like, we love you and everything, but we think that you are in deep sin. And some would say, well, God showed you mercy. He could have done more. Like he didn't show mercy to your sons. All this argument, and Job is claiming his innocence, and kind of saying God's a bully, and all these things. And then we get to Job 28. And he seems to be spot on here. How does Job 28 fit? Because, Job's going to speak again here in the next chapter. True. You would take pride in your children, especially the amount. That's the question. Job says, this is the part where Job has the right theological mind, but his heart doesn't really agree with it. Because Job still wants a court date with God. He wants that. Think about that. I want my court date with God. And he has this picture of lawyers and bringing out his defense before God. If you truly fear God, would you ever want to have that meeting? Would you want to point your finger and say, God, you defend your actions? I wouldn't. Would you want to make that claim? Or does Job kind of accuse? I would say so. So I would say, as I read this, Job says, as we read in Job chapter 1, Job did fear God. Job did turn from evil. He is a proverbial wise man. And so, he is just saying what he knows to be true, and he is right, but his heart doesn't agree with it. So as is with everyone here, I feel like, and myself, we can say the right statements, the right doctrines, but do our hearts really agree? Well, as you mentioned a while back, most people don't do well when they just get older. Not necessarily going through pain and suffering, because when they get older, they just become apathetic, lukewarm. That's really not much suffering. And so it's really kind of hard to put into why 28 exists where it is. Some believe that Job was going through that lull part in his suffering, that he had a right moment. Some believe that Job 28 was just kind of thrown in there by a later redactor to kind of like keep people's like, hey, it's still good to fear God and obey Him, But no, I would just say Job has said a lot of right things. When Job talks about God's almightiness and God's power, he's right on. Who can tell God what to do? Who can do that? Job says all right things about God. He says a lot of things right about here, but his heart doesn't agree with it. as we're about to read in 29, 30, 31. Job's going to claim his innocence and wants a court date. The fleshly. Especially if you know you're innocent. You know what I mean? And then God in His grace literally shows up. And so as much as I want to say, fearing God, while that is wisdom, Jesus is always the pinnacle of wisdom. Always. And so when I see here wisdom is more valuable than anything you can own, Jesus is wisdom in human form. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Wisdom became human form, and that is Jesus. And you're still going to fear Him. I promise you, if Jesus were to pop up one day like a lightning bolt, each and every one of us would fly to the floor. It would just be amazing. I hate to use the word respect. I respect my boss. I'm not afraid of my boss. I'm not afraid of my boss, Jackie. Sorry, I had to make sure people are waiting. That's just as the ending question to ask yourself in your reading, in your quiet time, in your thinking of your life. Think. Is Jesus the most valuable God you know and in pursuit? And if He is, last week, did it show? Does it really show? So, all right, we're going to go ahead and have some time to share some prayer requests.